Okay, it's 7 o'clock. We'll get started. Welcome to History Night in Springettsbury Township. This is a venue started by the Springettsbury Township Historic Preservation Committee, of which I'm chairman. The plan is to offer these free events 3 times a year from 7 o'clock until 8:30 in the evening. Tonight's might be just around 1 hour. During the second Wednesday of April, July, and October. Thanks to the Springettsbury Township supervisors for their support of History Nights. Tonight's presentation is on the Cadorus Creek, which forms the northwest boundary of our township. Years before the first railroads entered York County, waterways were the most economical means of transportation. And yes, even the Cadorus Creek was utilized more than you might imagine. I'm Stephen H. Smith. Tonight, I'll be presenting the story of the Cadorus Navigation Works. Here are some sources that I used. The York County History Center, The Amazing Pennsylvania Canals, and other books about Bill Shank, the American Canal Society, based in Easton, Pennsylvania, newspapers.com, lancasterhistory.org, and I'll explain why I use that site a little bit later. Library of Congress. Mike Spiker basically provided some photos of some of the ruins, other photos and postcards from my collection, and things that people have submitted me during some of the previous talks that I've done. First of all, coming attractions. In April 13th, 2022, our History Night presentation will be Early Schooling in Springettsbury. That particular presentation, I'll deal with one-room schools in the township. I'll do a little bit about why there's 2 school districts in the township, both Central York and York Suburban. And I'll go into something that is kind of unique in York County. There was a Springettsbury Township School District, and there was a Springettsbury Independent School District. So we'll go into that. And I hope you'll be able to attend that. Now, the underlying photo for this is actually a photo of Charlotte Hively's class of 1st and 2nd graders at Pleasureville School in 1946. Did anybody attend Pleasureville School? We have quite a few people back there. Okay, great. This photo was donated to the Springettsbury Township Historic Preservation Committee and placed in our archives. We will also scan donated photos and return the original back to you. So if you want to share some of your old photos, please get in contact with us, and we'd like to have them in our archives. Now, for the feature presentation. Imagine the early 1800s, in the days before railroads, when waterways and canals were the dominant means of economical transportation. The Cadorus Navigation Company operated canal boats pulled by a few mules to transport goods along the Cadorus Creek between downtown York and the Susquehanna River, across which connections could be made with the Pennsylvania Canal System. This illustration provides a good glimpse of how that feat was accomplished on the Cadorus Creek. I'll explain the details later. First, let's set the stage by looking at this comparative waterways versus railway timeline. Now, the Cadorus Navigation Works operated over its full length of 11 miles from York to the Susquehanna River from 1833 until 1847. It was in operation 5 years before the first rail lines ever entered York County, and 17 years before the Northern Central Railroad opened from York to Harrisburg. Before railroads, businessmen in York viewed Cadorus navigation as a means to efficiently bring in raw materials and export products, comparing the cost to ship 1 ton of goods per mile. In the 1830s, it cost 5 cents by canal versus 40 cents by wagon. Therefore, shipping by wagon was 8 times the cost versus shipping by canal. Why is this? A canal barge could carry 100 tons, easily being pulled by 2 mules, whereas a Conestoga wagon requires 6 horses to pull a 3-ton load. Also on the horizon, the Pennsylvania Canal was scheduled to be completed in 1833, which it was, on the Lancaster County side of the Susquehanna River, allowing a connection to that main canal system in the state, with it passing just across the river from the confluence of the Cadorus. Who remembers this place? Okay, well, everybody. What does it have to do with canals? Well, my interest in canals goes back to Avalon. Early every month during my senior year at Central, 2 seniors of the month were selected by Lions Clubs of Springettsbury and Manchester Townships. In January of 1968, I was one of the chosen ones, resulting in an invitation from the Springettsbury Lions Club inviting my dad and me to a monthly meeting at the Avalon banquet room. That night, the speaker was Bill Shank. He was an engineer by profession, however, an avid researcher of transportation history, although primarily American canals. He started the American Canal and Transportation Center in York to publish his many books and was a co-founder of both the American Canal Society and the Pennsylvania Canal Society. That night kindled my interest in canals, and I've been interested in them ever since. After that night, I probably attended at least 10 talks that he did around the state. So, like I say, that's my beginning of my interest in canals. Now, going back to this slide, bear with me as I go through these 3 illustrations that help you understand some of the terminology used in this presentation. The Cadorus Navigation Works was primarily a slackwater navigation system with a few short sections of traditional canals. Slackwater navigation is accomplished by a flowing creek of normally shallow depth by strategically placing dams along the way so that the current is diminished and the depth of water is increased. So that's a slackwater navigation system. This drawing of a slackwater navigation system from one of Bill Shank's books explains that system. Now, a dam is placed ever so often in the Cadorus Creek. So you basically have this dam placed every so often in the creek. Very often, a dam already existed, and they simply raised the height because the dams were there because of mills. So they utilized the mill dams. Now, the thing is, you have the slackwater above the dam, and the slackwater above the dam is all at the same elevation until you get to the next dam upriver. So the slackwater here, this is basically a constant elevation the whole way up to the next dam. And it has a minimum depth of 4 feet. You have the slackwater below the dam. Again, that's at least 4 feet deep. As you get down to the dam below that, it's deeper. So if you have a 7-foot dam, you'll be 7 foot deep at the lower dam and 4 foot deep here. but it's a constant elevation the whole depth, the whole length of that slackwater. And because you have a constant elevation, it's easy for mules to pull in either direction. So here's the dam. Now the key thing is, on a slackwater navigation on an existing creek, you basically have the dam going to a man-made island in the creek. The dam only goes partway across. On the other side, you have a canal lock, and that canal lock is used to raise and lower the boats around the dam. So you basically have slackwater for most of the length, and this is basically a lock that is traditionally as shown on a canal. Now, I'm not going to go through all the terms here, but I missed something here, so I'll go back. Now, the key thing as far as moving the boats around on the slackwater, traditionally it was done with long poles. So you have a long pole that you can push the boats around. So you don't need, and none of these boats had motors, so these are motorless barges. So you basically have the mules pulling them over a length and a pole to basically navigate them through the locks, because the mules didn't pull through the locks. So essentially that's how they were navigated. Now the terminology, the inside dimensions of the Cadorus navigation locks were 95 feet long and 18 feet wide. Traditionally, I think the biggest boats that I've seen in newspapers were 70 feet long. So you still had some room on either side to operate the lock gates. In this drawing, I'll basically go into the terminology as far as operating them, not how they were designed. The first focus on the balance beam. The balance beam up here is designed, it's very heavy at one end and long. And that is to counteract the weight of the lock gate, so that one person can easily move the gate. Here it's like halfway closed. When it's full way closed, it's back in this recess here, so the boat can move by it. The second control is the sluice control. Now the sluice control is up here at the top. There the operator can open and close a sluice door at the bottom to allow water to go through the closed lock gate. And I show that here on this photo of a woman who operates Lock 20 on the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal as an educational exhibit. In this photo, she has opened the sluice control to fill the lock chamber with water. So that's how the water gets in and out of these locks. A sluice control and a sluice door on the closed lock gate. Now, a presentation on early waterway navigation in York County would not be complete without noting the first working canal in Pennsylvania was in York County. The mile-long canal with 2 canal locks was located just north of York Haven. It allowed boats to get around 19-foot natural drop in the Susquehanna River known as the Conestoga Falls. The canal opened in 1797. So in this particular one, you basically have the canal here going from the top edge of the Conestoga Falls. The locks were down here, 2 locks, 80 feet by 12 feet were down at this end, and you had 4 large flour mills. This is basically developed by businessmen from Harrisburg, from Baltimore. They developed the canal lock here because they are interested, first of all, in processing flour for Baltimore, and they wanted to get the flour down from the central Pennsylvania, so they wanted to get around the falls here. But like I said, this opened and it basically allowed navigation back and forth on the Susquehanna River, at least from York County before you get down to rapids below, before rapids below where Long Level is right now. Now, the canal era in Pennsylvania, however, really took off when construction began on the Erie Canal in 1817. It was completed in 1825, so that was 8 years to construct the Erie Canal across New York State. It allowed waterway transportation between Albany on the Hudson River and Lake Erie. The Erie Canal supported connecting canals, allowing boats to reach deep into the American interior 27 years before the first East Coast railroads could do so. All these early transportation systems in the Midwest, they bypassed Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania said, we have to do something about it. So basically Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania in 1826 chartered a system of canals linked by the Allegheny Portage Railroad, which hauled canal boats on cable-driven railroad cars over the Allegheny Mountains. It opened, that entire canal system opened in 1834 and effectively went out of business in 1852 when the Pennsylvania Railroad finally reached Pittsburgh. So basically you had a period of years there where that was the main means of transportation to the western part of the state, and connecting to the Ohio River, which allowed further transportation to the Midwest. Now, because of this, the York businessmen hoped to tie into that system by backing the construction of the Cadorus Navigation Works. That coincides, now returning to our focus on the Cadorus Navigation Works, the Cadorus Creek shown here flows from York northeast to the Susquehanna River. So you basically have the Susquehanna River up here, York is down here, the flow is to the northeast, to this winding road. And it's 11 miles creek length between York and the Susquehanna River. Now, it appears no actual plans have survived. However, details from the Cadorus Navigation Works could be derived via design details gleaned from old newspapers, court cases, and the like, combined with an 1830s canal design practices, old maps, and the Cadorus Creek topography data from multiple sources. For example, the Cadorus averages 6 feet drop per mile from York to the North Sherman Street area. So in this area here, you basically York to North Sherman Street, you have fairly narrow, easy drop. However, once you get beyond that, you're in what's considered the Cadorus Narrows. There, the Cadorus drops 18 feet per mile. It's very remote, very rocky, hard to get to. Now, essentially, combining the collected research information on canal design knowledge, I visualized the placement of the 10 dams and 13 locks described by Simon Guilford in 1829. Simon was a canal design engineer. He had previously worked on a design of a canal in Lancaster County. And those records are readily available at the Lancaster History Center. So reviewing those design practices actually gave me some guidance here, But I also got guidance from Grant Bowden's analysis, research in canal, or into mills. Because like I said, they used a lot of the existing mill dams along the way to basically place the dams for the canal. Now, for a little bit of details of how the Cadorus navigation system worked, here a boat is traveling down the Susquehanna River, or traveling down the Cadorus toward the Susquehanna River. In the top illustration, after the mule driver ties up the mules, he opens the top sluices right here and allows water to fill the lock chamber. Once the water is filled, he basically pushes the beams to open that lock gate and allows the boat to move into that lock. Now, in moving the boat into the lock, that is all done with poles. The person on the boat uses them, and occasionally the mule driver will assist from up on the upper area of the lock. Once the boat is in the lock, the mule driver will close this gate and go to the other side and open the sluice. And that lowers the boat in the lock. When the boat is down at the lower level, then the water levels equalize with the slack water below the dam, and the boat can exit. And after the boat exits, they close the bottom sluices. That was the main rule, is whenever a boat goes through, you always close the sluices. So the sluice is always closed for the next boat coming up or down the navigation works. So just a quick look at when it's going to York. You basically, after the boat is inside the lock, the bottom lock gate is closed. Once it's closed, the mule driver goes up and opens up the top sluices to fill the lock chamber. So the boat is now rising because water is filling into that lock chamber. And then once it's rises the whole way to the top, the mule driver pushes the beam to open the top lock gate, and he closes the top sluices as the boat exits. So that's how the boats moved up and down the river using locks. Now, the thing about that, all the talks I did on, all the talks I attended on navigation on locks and navigation on the or basically equivalent systems of canal navigation, is the locks basically were, you never use mules to pull it through the locks because you can cause damage to it. And they always used these poles, and the people that gave these talks said whenever they tried it, it's simply tapping it just a little bit, because you have to, if you push too hard, you have to push equally hard in the other direction to stop it hitting the other wall. So it's a delicate touch to move these canal boats through the lock. And to navigate them in the slack water, when the mules aren't hooked up to them, you basically have this example. And this one, basically the canal boat operator is using the long pole as a lever, in this case, when he's getting close to the dock. So he uses that lever, and once he's out in the pool, he basically pushes it along using and he said, the people that, I've visited some canals in England, and it's amazing how they can move these big boats just with these poles. Now, like I said, prior to designing the Cadorus Navigation Works, Simone Guilford was involved with the design of the Conestoga Slackwater Navigation. It opened a few years before the one in York on the Cadorus, and that navigation utilized 18 miles of the Conestoga Creek from Lancaster to the Susquehanna River. Now, compared to the sparse plans for the Cadorus navigation, Lancaster history basically has a lot of the original plans for the Conestoga Navigation Works. Those plans were reviewed and very helpful in deriving the Cadorus Slackwater Navigation design. Now, several of the old photos exist from the Conestoga Slackwater Navigation. And this is Lock 7 of the Conestoga Slackwater Navigation. Here you can see the artificial railing that they built. By this time, this is years after it closed, so there's trees growing on that island already. But here's the lock, and here's the dam to the one side. Another lock that exists, photos exist of it, well after the fact, is the Lox Mill dam and lock system. That was Lock 6 on the Conestoga Navigation. So again, you have the island here. Here you have part of the lock still existing, and here you have the dam next to the mill. That was probably very close to the picture you saw on the majority of the sections of the Cadorus Navigation near the city, where they had mill dams. Another example of a lock that exists is this particular one, Lock 12, near the Holtwood Bridge in southern York County. Lock 12 was on the Susquehanna and Tidewater Canal. Now, that system opened in 1840, so it was about 7 years after the Cadorus Navigation system opened. This was a true canal system. They didn't use slackwater. They basically filled the canal with water from the river because they didn't have dams going across the river like they had on the Cadorus Creek. So this is an example of the remains of Lock 12. The Tidewater Canal was built between 1836 and 1839. I saw some newspaper articles. A lot of the people that built the Cadorus Navigation Works actually worked on this. So the stonework you see here is probably closer to what was in the Cadorus Navigation Works as compared to what was in the Conestoga Navigation Works in Lancaster. Now, we'll take a look at starting in York and going down the Cadorus Creek. Now, I'll focus mainly on the area of Springettsbury Township in this talk. My full talk is basically like an hour and 45 minutes, but I'm doing the 60-minute talk tonight. So, look, check my time there. I think I'll be pretty close. In 1852, we'll start off here at navigation in the borough of York. Now, in 1852, J. Thomas Williams, a York photographer, published this view of York looking south from the hill in North York. It was a lithograph shown at the bottom, produced from photographs that William had taken. At the top of this slide, I zoom in on the two canal boats being pulled along the Cadorus through York Borough. Even though the full length of the Cadorus Navigation ceased to operate in about 1847, sections between York and the four flour mills to the north operated into the 1850s. You can see that in these days, the Cadorus Creek in the city was not a deep ditch as it is today. That all changed after the big flood of 1833 when the Army Corps of Engineers got involved with it right before and right after World War II. Now, the canal section between dams 1 and 2, just north of York Borough, was a true canal section of the Cadorus Navigation Works. It was 9/10 of a mile in length and located between dams 1 and 2. So on this particular one, we'll look at the detail. The 1903 Frederick Rowe map of York and vicinity provides excellent details showing the locations of Dam 1 and Dam 2, plus the 9/10 of a mile canal section of the Cadorus Navigation Works. So you basically have, this is the Cadorus, and it was that crook at that time. And right here is Dam 1. Now Dam 1 is just east of Smalls Athletic Field. You have Poorhouse Run flowing into the upper side of the dam, and this is Willis Run flowing into the downstream side of the dam. Dam 1 was originally a dam that was built for Lox Mill. And essentially George Lox, at that time when the Cadorus Navigation was built, he had to basically provide an agreement of using his head race to widen it to create this canal. So basically you have this canal section here was originally this canal section here that went down to a lock here and a lock down here. I got a closer one a little bit later. But essentially that was a head race that was widened so a canal boat could get down through there. And then right at the end, they took off part of the water for the locks. And he was guaranteed a certain amount of water. And when he didn't get the certain amount of water, there were basically lawsuits involved. And you can read those lawsuits and understand what is going on around his mill, which provided very nice information of kind of visualizing what it was like. Now, looking at the navigation locks and dams at Dam 2, we'll zoom into that area. Now, this is my visualization of taking all the data I could collect on this. Court cases, the locks, the information from Grant Foden, stuff in the newspapers. Essentially, this is a diagram of how that lock system worked. And this is essentially, if you go to that area, and this is actually the York County Parks system, the rail trail. If you go to that, this map is actually on, they used this on one of their plaques there explaining navigation in that area. So if you go there, and they've been after me to maybe do a talk in that parking lot, which I will eventually do. But a canal boat would travel from York, like I said, down this canal. I'll get this here right. So it would travel from York down this canal, and there'd be some boat loading areas here for the mill. But then there was a head race that went into Lox Mill, and then there's a tail race after it came out of the water wheels back into the creek. But essentially what the canal boat would do, the canal boat would then move into Lock 1, which would drop it into the Slackwater behind Dam 2. Now that particular lock was a 6-foot deep lock that had it was a way lock. And you usually had one way lock on the system, and that's where they placed their way lock. Now the way lock operated because it basically drained all the water out, and there's a cradle underneath that held the boat that went to a set of kind of levers on a weigh system. Every year they would weigh an empty boat, and certify what the empty weight was. And then whenever it came with a load of coal or a load of lumber, they'd weigh the whole thing and they subtract whatever the certified weight was. So that's how they charged for taking goods along the navigation system. So that was the Waylock. After the boat left the Waylock, then it would move down to Dam 2. And that was an existing dam there, what was for Widener's Forge. And Widener's Forge operated there, and it was later a mill at that site. But this was a lower head dam, and that particular dam, like I said, the lower head dam was there until, let's see, the flood of 1933 basically took that dam out. And it took out the Widener's Forge, which was left over. And you can see it better in this. This is a 1938 historic aerial photo where you can still see remnants of the canal here. And here was the head race. Now, up here, this is where Dam 2 was located. You can still see parts of the creek. Now, this is 5 years after that dam was wiped out. And essentially, this barn here becomes San Carlos in 1962. So this particular area here, you just have San Carlos now. This area here was taken up when the Army Corps engineers came in. Now, at that particular time, Lox Mill was located right here. And I have two photos of Lox Mill here. This particular Lox Mill photo is a westward view of Lox Mill in 1870. The first mill at this site was in 1743. However, 4 generations of Locks owned the mill between 1805 and 1901. The water use agreement between George Lox and the Cadorus Navigation Company, like I said, ended up in court cases after the navigation company failed to adequately keep Dam 1 in good repair to maintain good water flow to Lox Mill that it was entitled to via a contract that was signed. Now, this is a photo of Lox Mill in 1969, just a few days before it was taken down. You can see the crane here ready to take it down. Now, it was taken down when the 2-lane Arsenal Road was widened to 4 lanes, Route 30, during 1970. This right here is the original Arsenal Road. Now, the original Arsenal Road was located here until 1948. It went over 4 sets of railroad tracks. I talked to people and they said there were major backups here because it went into a railroad guard right below it. So sometimes these tracks would be closed for 15 minutes to 20 minutes. So the traffic would back up here. And with the traffic backing up, then they would be unleashed on this 1-lane bridge. This is a 1-lane bridge. It was built in 1884, and essentially this bridge, traffic had to wait to go by it. Now, looking at some of the things here on this particular photograph, 1948, you basically have this bridge was going to be taken down and replaced with a 2-lane concrete bridge. What really alleviated the traffic backlog, though, was this bridge over the 4 railroad tracks. So this bridge here really alleviated the bottlenecks in the area, plus getting rid of this. So one is that old bridge going back to 1884. Here, this is the new concrete bridge. Now it's 2-lane. This is the Naval Ordnance plant, which became Harley-Davidson, and later it was torn down to put a warehouse there. This is the Lox Mill in 1948. That was basically used for storage. And then over here is the barn that became San Carlos. That's a neat photo. This is just another neat photo of looking down through that bridge to the Lox Mill here. And here they're just building, you see some of the piers for the concrete bridge, which is now Route 30. This is a neat photo of looking at the cars waiting for the oncoming traffic to pass over it. So just imagine you have 30 cars backed up trying to get across the railroad tracks, and then they come upon this, and then they have to wait in line again to get across that bridge. Not fun times. And that was only back in 1948. Is anybody living in 1948? I guess some people are. You probably didn't go on this, did you? No. Now today, this is an aerial photo. You can still see basically the supports for that 1884 wrought iron bridge are still there. So we'll go up to the next lock. This is a looking at the Cadorus Creek in 1883 as we reach Lock 3, which is Smalls Mill and Dam 3. Now, this is a Smalls Cadorus Mill drawing. It's an early sketch of Smalls Cadorus Mill as viewed from the slackwater behind Dam 3. At that time, slackwater went right up to the mill. The head race was located right here. And here's Dam 3, and then here's the slackwater below Dam 3. So the head race, the water went into the mill here, went through the water wheels, and exited here, back into the Cadorus. Now, essentially, this particular dam, a mill did not exist at this point. However, PA&S Small discovered the fact that a dam would be placed here and it was needed for the Cadorus navigation works. So they immediately purchased adjoining land to build a mill at the site, concurrently with the dam being built. So this dam and this mill was built at the same time. That's why the dam comes right off the end of the mill. So essentially this mill site was determined because of the Cadorus navigation works decided they needed a dam at this location. So this is a Lock 3 visualization, partly using a 1908 Sanborn map. The right side of the illustration basically shows where the lock would have been. Here's the dam, here's the lock that was used, and the towpath basically is pretty much all in Springettsbury Township side of the creek. Now, the other part of this basically shows that you're going from a 336-foot elevation, slackwater elevation, backed up from down to Dam 4. So you're going from an elevation of 343 feet down to 336 feet. So pretty much all the mill dams were raised to 7 feet to create 7-foot locks. Now, the neat thing about this photo, you can go to a 1937 photo that basically shows the dam. It shows the slack water below the dam, up to the mill here. The Smalls Cadorus Mill was last run by water power in 1945. And the reason that was, the Army Corps of Engineers were working on the Cadorus flood control project, and they were blowing up dams all along the Cadorus. So they blew up this dam on September 5th, 1945. So they breached that dam. Again, that was part of the Cadorus flood control project. Now today, smallest Cadorus Mill looks like this. And the creek doesn't come anywhere close. The former Mills dam was located right here. The Cadorus Creek is down here. The Heritage Rail Trail Park is on this side. One question that I've gotten a number of times deals with the roof structure. And before I get to that, this is a photo that Mike Spiker took, telephoto lens from Black Ridge Road, that shows the west side of the Cadorus Mill. And this shows the east side or the south side of Cadorus Mill presently from the rail trail. A question I got several times about this particular roof, he said, well, on your earlier slide, it doesn't have this type of roof. Well, you can actually find photos at the York County History Center. One is dated 1895, and the other is 1905. And again, this photo basically shows the dam breast here. It shows the head race going into the dam, and here's the tail race coming out to the Slackwater. Here, they put on a different type of roof, a massive roof, and they probably did that for a little bit additional storage area on that level. So that was probably done around 1900. Now, the next dam we're looking at is Lock 4 and Meyer's Mill at Dam 4. So Meyer's Mill, here's a picture of Meyer's Mill. Mike Spiker took this picture of Meyer's Mill from the Heritage Rail Trail, which passes by it. There was a Meyer's Mill at this site as early as 1799. Samuel Myers built the present massive brick structure in 1841 when the Cadorus Navigation was in operation. More recently, the place is known as Locust Lane Mill. And in 2015, the collections of items packed into that place were featured on an episode of History Channel's American Pickers. So you had Mike and Frank picking in that area in 2015. So here's the green visualization map that I put together. This is an illustration showing the location of Lock 4. Now, Lock 4 is up here. The mill dam was not changed from the mill days, so I could get a good illustration of this via a sandboard map of where the dam was located. The Slackwater Navigation, again, it goes from 336 feet to 329 feet at the bottom, below the dam. So it's got another 7-foot drop. And again, this is backed up by research that Grant Bowden did. So essentially, at that time, right now, you basically have the road coming from Pleasureville that goes across the creek here, and then it circles up like this. Back then, the road to Pleasureville was on this side of the creek. It went over a covered bridge here that stood until the mid-50s. And then it went by the mill. And then you had this road to Small's Cadorus Mill and this road going over to Amicksville. So essentially, the head race for the dam came off of this area, went through the mill, and then the tail race down here. Now, when you look at aerial photos, 1937, you can see those, and I dotted in where the road is now. Now you have the bridge over the Cadorus Creek here, and then it circles around like this. So, but back then you had this road up here. You have two structures up here. Are these remnants of the Canal Lock? Well, it turns out they aren't. This is actually on the farm. Let's see, I got it here someplace. ahead of myself. Okay, this is a photo of potential remnant stone. This is one of the larger. Okay, get my right place. Oh, here it is. These are features that are seen in the 1937 aerial photo. The stonework at left side may have been repurposed remnants from Lock 4. The lime kiln to the right is a later 19th century addition. So they probably used the remnants from the lock to create a roadway to get in to dump stuff into the top of the lime kiln. Now today those are used fixed up a little bit because they use these on Yorktown farms as a wedding venue. This area has been the backdrop of outdoor weddings, and the site is popular for picture taking before and after the wedding. So you can find a lot of pictures of this particular site on the internet because of that. So this is what the area looks like today. And today there is still a low-head dam here. That dam was not removed by the Army Corps of Engineers because at that time the fire companies of Springettsbury Township and Manchester Township were using that pond to draw for their pumpers. So it's like they basically convinced the Army Corps of Engineers not to take that dam out. However, eventually it was considered a safety hazard, so they replaced that 7-foot dam with basically a 1.5-foot dam. So there's still a pool of water back here that they can draw water for their pumpers. I don't know if they still do or not, but that's the reason that was put in. Now, there are remnants like this kind of all over the place up there. The way it's squared up, it might be a remnant from one of the Canal Locks, possible. Now, when the canal was finished up to this point, by July 4th of 1832, the first paying passengers ride the company's boat named Cadorus on the Cadorus Navigation Works, when only the initial 3 miles from York had been completed. Up to that point, many Yorkers paid 25 cents to ride canal boats on those excursions. Now, the Cadorus canal boat was 70 feet long and unpowered. Some people had confused that with the steamboat Cadorus, which was built in 1825. This is like 7 years earlier. Now, the steamboat Cadorus, which was the first iron steamboat in America, that was built in York for duty on the Susquehanna River. However, when it did not work out of using that on the Susquehanna River, the investors sold the steamboat in 1828, after which the steamboat did duty as a ferry boat on coastal North Carolina rivers. So this is not the steamboat. Next we look at the Lock 5, Mundus Mill. Now, Mundus Mill, essentially, at the time the canal was built, was known as Brillinger's Mill. There's a number of generations of Brillingers that had the mill, starting in the 1700s, going to I think the early 1900s. And then a family of Mundus owned it. So this particular visualization map here shows what that area looked like in 1833. You basically have the canal's boats coming down from York here, going by Dam 5. Again, Dam 5 is noted. It's a good representation of that was the location of it. You have the head race going to the dam here, which is the reason that road is named Mundus Race Road. And you have the canal boats then heading down this way underneath. And the reason you have two bridges here right now, you have the bridge over the Cadorus and the bridge over the tail race from going to the creek. Now, the dam itself Here's a 1937 aerial photo of the same thing. Basically, Dam 5 right here. So Dam 5 is located right here. Now that was removed late in 1945. Again, the Army Corps of Engineers blew that up. And the mill itself began using electricity in 1934, although they also used water power until 1945 when that dam was removed. And then you have this photo that basically shows the location today. And you basically have this pinch down area here. There are probably dam remnants in there and lock remnants in this area here. Here are some views of Mundus Mill, 1936 on the north side. This is 1945 on the south side. You basically had a mill pond and the water went into the water wheels at this location. And this is what it looks like today. If you zoom into this area right here, you can see the entrance for the head race. Now we go to a very interesting part of the lock system. One dam down in the Narrows was 21 feet high. That was the biggest dam on the Cadorus Navigation Works. And it was a 3-lock dam. It had locks 6, 7, and 8 stacked up. This is my visualization of what that looked like. That top is supposed to represent the dam breasts going across there. And then you have a lock system, which are locks 6, 7, and 8. Again, they use 7-foot locks. They like to have like 2 standard lock heights all along because it made interchangeable parts from one lock to the next. Kind of interchangeable, what they had then. But that gives you a basic idea how a step lock works. And this is where it was placed. It was placed south of where the Starview Sportsman Association grounds are located. This is a very isolated place. And landowners don't like you to be in there. Mike Spiker was friends with a few of them down the river, down creek, that he was able to get in to take some photos. But this area is very remote, very rocky. I suspect that this particular area where the dam was located and the locks were located here. So that it basically came off this side of the dam and went down along the side because you needed good structure for the 3-lock system. So this is what it looks like today. The dam would have been located right here, and you can see like lines in aerial photos. That might be the location where the locks were. And below where the dam was, you still see rubble all the way down through here. So when that was blown up, a lot of the rubble probably is in the creek bed. So this is what a 3-rise lock system looks like. And one of the early presentations that I had, a person photoshopped this one for me to use in presentations. I think it gives a good representation of what a 3-lock system looks like. Now, here's a 3-lock system that I was on. And this isn't photoshopped. I was actually on it's a cruise ship called the Yorktown. I was on that 3 times, 2 times in the Caribbean and on the Great Lakes. So here we're going from navigating around Niagara Falls. It's called the Welland Canal. This is a 49-foot high lock gate. So we're coming down 3 locks that are 49 feet high. So you basically have a lot of water behind those locks. Thankfully, they hold. Now, this is something they couldn't build back in their early days. Now, basically, early days, the Welland Canal Locks, they had 40 locks that opened actually before the Cadorus navigation system opened. I think they were opened in like 1829. You can navigate around the boats around the Niagara Falls. So this is what those 8 locks look like now with a lift of 326 feet. So they're still using locks, staircase locks. Next is the canal section over D Run at Dam 7. We start seeing some remnants of the canal locks in this area. Now, thankfully, Mike Spiker was friends with some people in the area. He actually grew up there, so they allowed him to get in and photograph some things. This is what that canal system looks like in that area. You basically have, when there's an intersecting waterway, especially one in a deep ravine, you built a bridge over that intersecting waterway to carry the canal section that goes from the dam to the lock, and also the towpath. So you basically have a pretty substantial bridging area that you have to do. And that's what it looks like from an aerial photo. Now, canoeists often have helmet cams on when they shoot the rapids down that area. And it takes a pretty experienced canoeist because people get hurt all the time, I understand, doing this. But there's photos of this bridge, and this bridge always intrigued me because its structure was much more heftier than needed for this bridge across there. So I always wondered if this was D Run. So Mike Spiker was actually able to get permission from a landholder, and he walked down from the upper area down to D Run. And this is walking down through that area. He basically got down far enough to confirm that that was D Run, the picture was, where it was from. Now, these rocks are slippery, and it's like, he nearly sprained his ankle a couple times, so he didn't go down any further in this. Now, later on, one of the only indication I had of remnants was this photo in a book that Gerald Smeltzer put together in 1963 called The Canals Along the Lower Susquehanna. Now, Gerald was a history teacher at Northeastern when he did this book. He notes it's in the vicinity of D Run and states, old remnants of dam breasts found here, one had a lock wall behind it. Up to this time, this is the only remnants I had seen physical or photographic evidence of. Now, Mike Spiker was able to get permission to go to that area another way. This is down along what might have been the canal and towpath, going up to that bridge. Now, here he looks up the run from that bridge, and here in that area, you see these man-made set of locks that appear to be the same canal lock that Gerald Smeltzer looked at. Also in that area, there's other indications like these squared off rocks and rocks with like drill bits in that were probably part of the Cadorus navigation works. Now, he'd only get to a limited area. Again, getting permission is of that area is because that's the same, that's Trout Run area that you have this Seven Gates myth of an insane asylum fire that people kind of want to get in there all the time, and the people do not like, or the landowners don't like all these people traveling over their areas. So it's like getting permission is difficult. But we found, Mike was able to find some remains. Getting back to the very end of the canal section, which isn't on my blog post, but will soon be, you basically come from the Trout Run area here, and there's a dam Dam 9 and Lock, get this up. Okay, Dam 9 and Lock 7, or Lock 11, right downstream from that is Trout Run. So there was probably a bridging Trout Run at this area. Then you get down to the final dam, Dam 10 and Lock 12, right next to the Cadorus furnace. Now at that area, they needed another design to go to the river. They came up with a crib work design, and that crib work is used in some of the newspaper articles from that time. They described the crib works that were used in their area. Crib works were used in some other Simone's canal designs. So this is what the canal crib works look like. The mules would bring the canal boat down to Dam 10. They would unhook, go down to the bridge, get back to this area here so they could rehook up after the canal boat had dropped down to the elevation of the river above the rapids. There's actually two exits to the river, above the rapids and below the rapids, which is the actual confluence of the Cadorus into the Susquehanna. So they had this system that they built on the north side of the Cadorus here. And those crib works were able you to get by this area. The Cadorus itself is shallow here. You wonder, how do you ever get canal boats through here? Well, this shows what the crib works look like. They would build a section of it to the north side of the Cadorus. So you have the Cadorus here. Cadorus Creek is shallow. You have the crib works here, and you had a 4-foot deep canal with a towpath on this side. So the towpath up here and the 4-foot deep channel here. So this is just below Dam 10. If you go halfway down to the river, then you have the crib works. Is basically, you're keeping the same elevation here, the 255 feet, but the creek elevation is basically lower and it's shallow. Now those crib works, when they were basically dredging the area for a new highway in Philadelphia, they came across these crib works. And they discovered these were the remains of a canal that was in the area that utilized crib work construction. So these survived from the 1820s because they were in the mud and muck of the Delaware River. So you have the wood here of a crib works in Delaware surviving. But if you go back to, here's halfway down to the river from Dam 10, and here's the full way down. So you have the 251-foot elevation of the Cadorus Creek where it enters the river at that location. And you have the 255-foot elevation to enter the river right above the rapids. And it's actually, they're known as chestnut ripples on some maps, and some, they're the Hadelman Rapids. Basically, they're 4-foot higher elevation on the Susquehanna River than the exit here. So you basically have this channel, 1833 navigation channel above Chestnut Ripples. And this is a real aerial photograph of the Susquehanna River that shows the Chestnut Ripples here. And from that down to here, it's a 4-foot drop. Above here, the water is fairly calm and allowed boats to go across the river simply by using poles to connect with the Pennsylvania Canal system on the other side. And haven't found any evidence they actually took the canal boats into that. They probably simply docked there and offloaded their cargo to a canal boat that is part of the Pennsylvania Canal system. So this is a view of where that Canal Locks or the canal system was probably located. And here is a boat that I've used. Again, a guy provided this. He found this on an unnamed photograph of a canal boat on the Library of Congress website. They didn't know where it was located. He decided it looked like what it would be like to go down the Cadorus Creek. So he photoshopped in Cadorus Navigation Company here on this boat. So this is a Photoshop because it's like this is before he had cameras too. So it couldn't be a real one. But it could have been taken of a similar type canal boat. So that's the end of this talk. I'm only went 10 minutes over. But if you have any questions, I'll entertain them now. Yes?
Steve,
Yeah.
what was the time frame from York to the river? How long did it take? That's
Yeah, I've seen some, I've seen various things. It's like, it varied from like 30 minutes to an hour. And the 30 minutes was probably no traffic to contend with. If they're contending with traffic, a boat's going the other way and they have to wait, that's probably an hour. So 30 minutes isn't bad for 11 miles. But
Takes you that some time now.
yeah, yes.
How many boats would go up and down that a day?
I saw that the Navigation Works had 10 boats operating. I imagine they could make a couple trips, but again, it depends on what they were delivering. The big thing that they used is lumber coming down the Susquehanna, that they went into the places in York using lumber, or coal coming down the river delivered to York. The things that they exported were typically flour in barrels, but that was mostly after the Tidewater Canal opened up. Before that, they were exporting stuff primarily upriver to Harrisburg and places north. So they were taking stuff coming from down the river, making products out of it, and then sending it upriver before 1940. After 1940, then they had access to the Tidewater Canal, so they were basically supplying stuff to Baltimore, their product. But raw materials typically came downriver, products went out after 1940, went downriver. Yes?
Were there any other private, like, say, a farmer or a mill that wasn't part of the Cadorus Navigation Company that would have a boat or a barge that would use the canal? Could they?
I didn't see any evidence of that, but I can imagine if somebody wanted to use it and they said, and the navigation company said, well, okay, we'll charge you this, a fairly reasonable fee, it'd be extra money for them. I didn't even see why they would turn them down. Yes?
So there was a water bridge over the Mill Creek.
Yes.
It was a bridge that held water.
Right, yeah.
What kind of bridge and how was that constructed?
They typically had like timbers, and then they had stuff that they could basically make it. I actually have seen pictures of it on other systems. It's leaking all the time, so it's like it's not watertight, but it keeps most of the water in. But I've seen it on pictures of it that Bill Shank has in his books. So a bridge is, I've seen it's used many times, put it that way, because you have to always get over these intersecting waterways. Yes. Anything else? If not, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you come back for the one in next year. Thank you.